Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to be continuing to read Moby Dick. So, let's get going. Also, we're going to do about 10 pages, even though it spans part of the next chapter after this. So, let's get going. Chapter 109. Ahab and Starbuck in the cabin. According to usage, they were pumping the ship next morning, and lo, no inconsiderable oil came up with the water. The casks below must have sprung a bad leak. Much concern was shown, and Starbuck went down into the cabin to report this unfavourable affair. In sperm whalemen, with any considerable quantity of oil on board, it is a regular semi-weekly duty to conduct a hose into the hold and drench the casks with sea water, which afterwards, at varying intervals, is removed by the ship's pumps. Hereby the casks are sought to be kept damply tight, while the changed character of the withdrawn water, the mariners readily detect any serious leakage in the precious cargo. Now from the south and west the Pequod was drawing nigh to Formosa, and the Bashi Isles, between which lies one of the tropical outlets from the China waters into the Pacific. And so Starbuck found Ahab with a general chart of the Oriental archipelagos spread before him, and another separate one representing the long eastern coasts of the Japanese islands, Nippon, Matsumai, and Shikoke. I pronounced those so wrong. With his snow-white new ivory leg braced against the screwed leg of his table, and with a long pruning hook of a jackknife in his hand, the wondrous old man, with his back to the gangway door, was wrinkling his brow and tracing his old courses again. "Who's there?" hearing the footsteps at the door, but not turning round to it. "On deck, begone." Captain Ahab mistakes it. "It is I." "The oil in the hold is leaking, sir. We must up Burton's and break out." "Up Burton's and break out, now that we are nearing Japan? Heave to here for a week to tinker a parcel of old hoops? Either do that, sir, or waste in one day more oil than we make good in a year. What we come 20,000 miles to get is worth saving, sir. So it is, if we get it. I was speaking of the oil in the hold, sir, and I was not speaking or thinking of that at all. Begone, let it leak. I'm all a leak myself. Aye, leaks in leaks. Not only full of leaky casks, but those leaky casks are in a leaky ship, and that's a far worse plight than the Pequod's, man. Yet I don't stop to plug my leak, for who can find it in the deep-loaded hull, or how hope to plug it, even if found in this life's howling gale? Starbuck, I'll not have the Burtons hoisted. What will the owners say, sir? Let the owners stand on Nantucket Beach and out-yell the typhoons. What cares Ahab? Owners? Owners. Thou art always prating to me, Starbuck, about those miserly owners, as if the owners were my conscience. But look ye, the only real owner of anything is its commander. And hark ye, my conscience is in this ship's keel. On deck." "Captain Ahab," said the reddening mate, moving further into the cabin with a daring so strangely respectful and cautious that it almost seemed not only every way seeking to avoid the slightest outward manifestation of itself, but within also seemed more than half distrustful of itself. "A better man than I might well pass over in the what he would quickly enough resent in a younger man. Aye, and in a happier Captain Ahab." "Devils, dost thou then so much as dare to critically think of me? On deck?" "Nay, sir, not yet. I do not entreat, and I do dare, sir, to be forbearing. For shall we not understand each other better than hitherto, Captain Ahab?" Ahab seized a loaded musket from the rack, forming part of the most south seamen's cabin's furniture, and pointing it towards Starbuck, exclaimed, "There is one God that is Lord over the earth, and one Captain that is Lord over the Pequod. On deck." For an instant, in the flashing eyes of the mate and his fiery cheeks, you would have almost thought that he had really received the blaze of the levelling tube. But mastering his emotion, he half calmly rose, and as he quitted the cabin, paused for an instant and said, thou hast outraged, not insulted me, sir. But for that I ask thee not to beware of Starbuck. Thou wouldst but laugh, but let Ahab beware of Ahab. Beware of thyself, old man. He waxes brave, but nevertheless obeys. Most careful bravery is that, murmured Ahab, as Starbuck disappeared. What's that, he said. Ahab, beware of Ahab. There's something there. Then unconsciously, using the musket for a staff, with an iron brow he paced to and fro in the little cabin, but presently the thick plates of his forehead relaxed, and returning the gun to the rack, he went to the deck. Thou art but too good a fellow, Starbuck, he said, lowly to the mate. Then raising his voice to the crew, furl the t'gallant sails, and close reef the topsails, fore and aft. Back the main-yard, up Burton, and break out in the main hold. It were perhaps vain to surmise exactly why it was that, as respecting Starbuck, Ahab thus acted. It may have been a flash of honesty in him, or mere prudential policy which, under the circumstance, imperiously forbade the slightest symptom of open disaffection, however transient, in the important chief officer of the ship. However it was, his orders were executed, and the Burtons were hoisted. Chapter 110. Queequeg in his coffin. Upon searching, it was found that the casks last struck into the hold were perfectly sound, and that the leak must be further off. So, it being calm weather, they broke out deeper and deeper, disturbing the slumbers of the huge ground-tier butts, and from that black midnight sending those gigantic moles into the daylight above. So deep did they go, and so ancient and corroded, and weedy the aspect of the lowermost puncheons, that you almost looked next for some mouldy cornerstone cask containing coins of Captain Noah, with copies of the posted placards, vainly warning the infatuated old world from the flood. Tierce after tierce, too, of water and bread and beef and shooks of staves and iron bundles of hoops were hoisted out, till at last the piled decks were hard to get about, and the hollow hull echoed underfoot, as if you were treading over empty catacombs, and reeled and rolled in the sea like an air-freighted demijohn. Top-heavy was the ship as a dinnerless student with all Aristotle in his head. Well was it that the typhoons did not visit them then. Now, at this time it was that my poor pagan companion and fast-bosomed friend, Queequeg, was seized with a fever, which brought him nigh to his endless end. Be it said that in this vocation of whaling, sinecures are unknown. Dignity and danger go hand in hand, till you get to be captain. The higher you rise, the harder you toil. So with poor Queequeg, who, as harpooneer, must not only face all the rage of the living whale, but, as we have elsewhere seen, mount his dead back in a rolling sea, and finally descend into the gloom of the hold, and bitterly sweating all day in that subterraneous confinement, resolutely manhandle the clumsiest casks, and see to their stowage. To be short, among whalemen the harpooneers are the holders, so called. Poor Queequeg, when the ship was about half as disembowelled, you should have stooped over the hatchway and peered down upon him there, where, stripped to his woolen drawers, the tattooed savage was crawling about amid that dampness and slime, like a green-spotted lizard at the bottom of a well. And a well or an ice-house it somehow proved to him, poor pagan, where, strange to say, for all the heat of his sweatings, he caught a terrible chill which lapsed into a fever, and at last, after some days' suffering, laid him in his hammock close to the very sill of the door of death. How he wasted and wasted away in those few long lingering days, till there seemed but little left of him but his frame and tattooing. But as all else in him thinned, and his cheekbones grew sharper, his eyes nevertheless seemed growing fuller and fuller. They became of a strange softness of lustre, and mildly but deeply looked out at you there from his sickness. A wondrous testimony to that immortal health in him, which could not die or be weakened. And like circles on the water, which, as they grow fainter, expand, so his eyes seemed rounding and rounding, like the rings of eternity, an awe that cannot be named would steal over you as you sat by the side of this waning savage, and saw as strange things in his face as any beheld who were bystanders when Zoroaster died. For whatever is truly wondrous and fearful in man never yet was put into words or books. And the drawing near of death, which alike levels all, alike impresses all with a last revelation, which only an author from the dead could adequately tell. So that, let us say it again, no dying Chaldee or Greek had higher and holier thoughts than those whose mysterious shades you saw creeping over the face of poor Queequeg, as he quietly lay in his swaying hammock, and the rolling sea seemed gently rocking him to his final rest, and the ocean's invisible flood tide lifted him higher and higher towards his destined heaven. And with that, we're actually going to end the episode there, because that is about 10 pages, which is about half of where we need to get through. So I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night, no matter what time of day it is. I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.